It's go time.
Welcome to Quick Kicks here on Third Down Gamble, with your host Don Charbin and special guest Steve Daniel, CFL Associate Vice President of Football and Team Analytics.
Steve, welcome back. And there's always that look at football in North America. How does the CFL compare to the NFL? There's a lot of different elements that you can look at, and you're probably the best one at understanding what needs to be reviewed.
One of the things we talked about leading into our conversation is the structure of our game. We compare it to the NFL, like I suggested, but analyzing how long it takes to play certain parts of our game and keeping the game whole is kind of the theme of preserving what we have. It sort of started when my boss back in the day, sort of early 2010s, Kevin McDonald and Glenn Johnson, they were kind of head of football at the time prior to Greg Dick, my current boss. And they decided, let's go to the NFL offices, which was a thrill for me. And they brought me along. Walked into, you don't see an NFL sign up front. You kind of hardly know it's there. And then when you get in, you really know it's there because they have quite a presence. And I was able to spend some separate time from them wandering off with the stats people, talking about the rules and understanding their game relative to ours with one goal in mind, and that is to put the two games on an equal footing statistically so that we could make direct comparisons in our game to theirs. Like we have team loss yards when we have sacks. They do not. Well, they do. They have sack yards. But if you have a kneel, that counts as a rush. With us, it's a team loss. So those things have to be brought in parallel, or their penalty reporting is quite different than ours.
Oh, so
declined penalties they never talk about, but they're so designated in their play-by-play. And then if there's offsetting penalties, so say you go through the first quarter, you have a holding penalty and that's assessed, and then you have offsetting roughness penalties, and then you have a declined offside penalty. They would report one penalty, not the offside that was declined, nor the two offsetting EORs, as we call them. And so penalties, there'd be one. There weren't one, there were four. They just had different treatment. Fortunately, there's a website called NFLpenalties.com, which lays it all out in incredible detail. So you got to find those sources of data that are A, reliable, and B, allow us to compare what we have because we report every penalty, declined or otherwise. And so that's one example. So what I do then is take all the data from the NFL and all the data from us, track the NFL in fine detail, including possessions, where their drives start, so that we can then compare that to us. And their drives start exactly as far from the goal line as ours do. They start at about it used to be exactly. Now they're a little bit closer. But it used to be they start about the 27-yard line. Ours start at the 37. Nowadays, I think this past season, all of their drives, however many thousand possessions they had, started at 30. So that's a trend I'm interested in. Why is it starting at the 30 when it used to start at the 27? Well, that relates to their kickoff rule because a certain number of their possessions come after kickoffs. And so that fine level of detail allows us to go to our rules committee meetings and say, okay, here's us, here's the NFL. And then you take it from there to a little more perhaps the look and feel of our game, which is where our commissioner is looking because it's a product. So that is the basis of the look with the NFL, what we're after.
the NFL also has an idiosyncrasy with their penalty application where, and I saw it on the weekend, if you get a pass interference call and a rough play call against the defense, you got to pick one or the other. Where in the CFL, it's pass interference plus the unnecessary roughness or the UR. gets combined. I don't know why they get rid of roughing penalties as an option. That should be absolute the way it is in the CFL.
I agree 100% with you. Their applications are quite different. Defensive holding, for example, we call it illegal contact, which is not an automatic first down. So, for example, if you're on 2nd and 14 and they have a illegal contact, now you're 2nd and 4. And for them, their holding is 5 yards, but it's an automatic first down. So you have all sorts of different types of applications, but I've never really understood why, if you commit a roughing foul, there's no consequences to it. That's a little strange. I watched the game, Seattle and the Rams, really carefully. I have to say, Tom Brady, I guess I wasn't a huge Tom Brady fan before, but I loved his game, of course, great quarterback. But I'll tell you, he and Chris Collinsworth teach you a lot about the game as it unfolds. They're both amazing analysts, which is why it's good to watch a game with Brady, because he knows the language of the game. Like I was watching a route, he goes, that's some kind of a 7 or a high 7. That's right. And you can see it wasn't just a short down and out. It went down maybe 25 yards and then to the sideline. And he's teaching us those subtleties of it. And that gives me ideas for analyzing our game. I think next year, hope there's a way we can start analyzing pass routes. And you watch a guy like Puka Nacua and how they bring him in and out of the game. It's amazing because I like his game so much. Our clubs do that too. Jeff Creever and I are always wondering how to break our game down. And you get it from watching and listening like we do. And it's fun. I enjoy the Seahawks anyway. They're kind of one of my favorites, but that's the intent. And then I can bring that knowledge to our rules committee and say, okay, they'll ask a question, a specific one. How many plays are there in an NFL game compared to ours? That's a good question. 14 more per game. And then the question you get is why? Well, it's obvious. Every time there's an incomplete pass or out of bounds, the clock does not start till the snap.
No, in the NFL, the clock does restart on and out of bounds up until the last 10 minutes.
At times, the incomplete pass, like for example, if an incomplete pass, it starts at the snap, correct?
Mm-hmm.
We don't. We wave the ball in.
Yes.
And so that adds time. And so you've got games now down there averaging 3 hours and 4 minutes, 3:05, which is about 15 minutes, compiled data for all 272 games. And it came to 3 hours and 4 minutes. And ours is 249 and a half, 250. There's 15 minutes extra. And that's outside our TV window, right?
Yes.
So you want a game to go from 4 to 7 and then a game from 7 to 10. Overlap is tough.
Well, functionally, they set their playoffs at 3.5 hours apart.
They do. We do too.
Even still, they almost run over. You talk about how we wave time in after incompletions, out of bounds. We still restart the clock. But one of the great time wasters that I know with the new 35-second clock that's going to go away was the transition from second to third and teams punting. The other one is, why do we run the clock on converts? Why not just shut it down and do what they do?
There's another one. I think that thought is there because it's time that it's not being availed of, but it's still just the same amount of elapsed time off a time of day clock.
True.
So we have two concerns. We want the game to take 2 hours and 40 minutes. Baseball was really aggressive in, putting in a pitch clock. That was really something.
Mm.
We want our games to take less time to watch, but just as many plays. And that is hard. That means your tempo has to be higher.
Well, that's where the 35-second clock comes in. But let's say there's 5 touchdowns in the game. That's 20 seconds per. Some of those touchdowns occur in the last 3 minutes where the clock doesn't run. So let's say it's 3 touchdowns. You're only adding a minute.
Yep.
And you're taking that minute out of the play time if you just chunk it and say no, or do it at when the ball is snapped, say, and then it only runs 2 or 3 seconds as opposed to 20. It just, to me, when I see a touchdown, and there's 10 minutes to go. And then when they finish the convert and it's down to 9:38, really?
Wasted time.
It is. It's for nothing.
It's wasted time.
I think you and I are more or less on the same page. We want to see football. We don't want to see time wasted during football.
One thing I've noticed about the NFL too, I've been watching carefully. They don't bring out the down markers. The official who places the ball on the field simply just points and says it's a first down.
Yes.
Take my word for it. And they do.
Yes.
Whereas we will make down box measurements and take a minute and a half to do that, or however long that might be. It doesn't happen very often, but it's there. Whereas they just keep it going. And their communication level, I'm quite impressed with. There's parts of the game, the NFL game, that I'm not as impressed with, but their strategies for officiating the game and keeping it moving are really good. And ours are too, but they're really effective in many other ways.
Well, what we see in the CFL, a lot of times a pass will be completed. The nearest official, typically a side judge, is looking and pointing like they've made the line to gain. He's pointing down the field.
Yep.
Now, the head referee has to agree with that.
Yep.
They have to point and say first down. But if they disagree, then maybe that's where the measurement comes out. I don't mind having a measure. It adds some drama to the game.
I guess so.
The virtual one that they use in the NFL is kind of
Well, the guy points and officials, the referee, you very, very seldom see him disagree with anything that the other officials do, especially penalty calls. He said, "Are you really sure that was, because they've already got the command center or whatever they use looking at it too."
Mm-hmm.
The one rule that I dislike is the one that affected the final 3 seconds of the Rams game against the Seahawks, where if a guy is touched on the way out of bounds, he's touched inbounds by somebody, but he runs out of bounds. He wasn't tackled, but they keep the clock running.
Mm-hmm.
They wave that, and the clock keeps going. Whereas
that was Puka Nacua on that play as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just sort of, it's a really fine line between, is the clock going to continue to run or is it not? And that game came down to that in a very small way. They probably wouldn't have scored in those 3 seconds, but they would have had a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And you're removing a chance. And that's something that concerns, that we were talking about in our winter meetings, is we want to preserve the final 3 minutes of the game in its present form and ensure that, if anything, we get more plays in that stretch, because the hard, cold fact for your listeners is the final 3 minutes of the two halves right now under the current rules is 10% of the time. And in that 10%, you have 21% of our plays, which is really something. That's a lot. So it's double the rate. So you have a play every 12.3 seconds. The rest of the game, you have a play every 27, 28 seconds. That's a profound difference.
That's a great way to express it. That's really eye-opening.
We're looking at the final 3 minutes of the first half, and the people that make these decisions, I just try to provide them as much information as possible. Kind of thing. That's what the job that Jeff and I have is to give as much information as we can, not just to our teams and our fans, but the people who design and redesign our game every year. And it's really fun to be kind of what's known as an ex officio member of these committees. You're there not with a vote, but you're there with a lot of influence.
Let's talk about the last 3 minutes of the first half. Now, that is a throwback to the rugby roots of this football game, where they played two halves of ball. Then you would have, I don't know, rugby does it, but that's where it comes from, is basically having that built in to give a team a chance while they had the win. How important is that last 3 minutes of the first half? And could it be just regular timing rules going into the halftime?
I don't view it in the same way as I view the final 3 minutes of the half. It's just my personal opinion. To me, the final 3 minutes of the first half are really no different than the other, 27 minutes of that first half. To me, it's not the closing part of the game where it's on the line and you're down by 8 points or you're down by 9. It's got none of those kind of dynamics. It's early in the game. What's the difference between a minute to go in the first half, other than driving to try to score before the half ends? There's an element of it, and I buy that, but it's not quite as urgent. And that's the level. That's the word I like to use. The urgency of the final 3 minutes of the game is really important. And I notice now the NFL is starting to publish what they call one-score games. But for me, I look at it, was the game still undecided, in other words, 8 points or less, at any point in that final 3 minutes? And here's the thing. Say it's 21-14, and you drive, score a touchdown, win the game 28-14. It becomes not a one-score game. But with a minute to go, it was still a one-score game, and that's what matters to me. It's like the getting a touchdown to secure the game with 30 seconds to go. That game was still not secured until you did that. So that's why we called them last 3 minute games. And 2 years ago, 60% of our games were that kind, which is a lot. Last year it was like 51 or 52%, so a little less. But that urgency is good.
Peril is fantastic. As a stat, it kind of befuddled me. When you look at the records of the teams, they kind of close the gap between top and bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have thought that there would have been far more games decided in the last 3 minutes because of the parity running through the leagues. And yet, doink, it's actually a little bit down.
Well, we had 41 games last year. So if you look at by team, it jumps out at you. Saskatchewan was 12-6. And they were 9-3 in games decided in the last 3 minutes. That's really saying something. Ottawa were 3-8 in the last 3 minute games, and it parallels their record. Whereas you get a team like Calgary, only 5 of their games went down to the final 3 minutes. Saskatchewan, there were 12. And that'll just, I think, to a certain extent, there's a randomness to it. It's balancing randomness with trends and patterns that I find the most fascinating. What's a true trend? Or is it simply just, it happened that way this year? I love that. Just kind of deep thinking into it. That's where, it's funny, I just finished my performance evaluation and with my boss. One of the things I told him, or he told me, was I'm sitting here always thinking about ways to help you understand what's going on the field. And that's what analytics are supposed to do. They're not supposed to be like WAR in baseball. Yes, I understand it. I got the definition. No, I don't. Yes, I don't like it because very few people understand it.
Can you explain it to me? Because I have no clue.
Well, it's called wins above replacement. So you take the average stats of the average guys. This is my understanding of it, and it's incomplete, I will admit, and say, okay, if I had to replace Aaron Judge, what kind of performance would I get? So you take what's average and compare it to his results in key areas like batting average and things like that, and calculate that difference. And so that way, anybody with a WAR above 0 0 is the league-wide average. So anybody with a WAR wins above replacement. It is, with those statistics, how many more wins your team would have with him in the lineup compared to a replacement. So if his WAR is 9, then they're 9 games above 500 as opposed to being even, say. So it's that intent. And for me, that's about 5 analytical steps too far. Whereas people look at pass efficiency rating and say, oh, what 92.3? What, that's stupid. That's not stupid. It's really easy. There's a bit of math in it, but only to make it what you'd call an index, a number, just a single number. And that's what I do with some other numbers for us, is you just take attempts, completions, yards, and touchdown passes, or interceptions, and divide it by attempts. And that's it. Those 4 things divided by attempts. Well, that isn't real hard. That's called arithmetic. It's not some sort of algorithm, which I can do without. I see the intent. I get the idea, but nah. And it's now, all you see is these analytics about when you watch an NHL game now, there's slot percentage and slot shots and shots from low danger zones. And okay, I got a coaching staff here. I'm their stats guy as a volunteer. And I give them what they want. And I said, if you want high danger slot chances by player, by period from me, go find somebody else. But I'll make you a shot chart of where our shots come from. And got to give people things they can use.
It's a utility kind of question. Is this really going to make or break your thought pattern when it comes to who's going to be on the lineup or out on the ice in a key moment? And if you're looking at where your shots are coming from, well, maybe a person that's getting more shots and is in a good position you'd like. But
yeah,
how do you define low danger, high danger? Like, is the goalie obstructed when they're making these assessments? How do they do it?
Well, you force my hand here to go to my least favorite statistic in the entire world of sports. And Pro Football Focus does really good work for us on video stuff, but their statistics, I make a point of looking away. They don't make any sense to me. And one of the things that they do is quarterback pressures. Well, what's a quarterback pressure? I have no idea. So if you're publishing numbers and saying this guy has 12 quarterback pressures, define that for me. Show me the 12. What's your definition? Why is this one not? And this one, you make the quarterback move this far to throw his pass. Is that a pressure? Or you hit him in the head and face mask him? I guess that's a pressure. Yeah. I don't know. And so we did it one year, and as I mentioned, I think in an earlier interview, we did the number of phone calls from offensive line coaches in the league threatening my very life itself. Decided maybe we won't do that one anymore. Well, they were really kind, but they just said, Steve, please don't do that. And I said, I agree.
Well, it's a judgment stat. It's where you're about hard to find based on what the field is providing you, based on how far the ball went. There's always a measure in everything that you do so that you can quantify it and qualify it. Where when you're looking at pressures, well, because the quarterback rolled out, was that a pressure?
Oh, I know.
The fact that he was being chased after he's rolled out because maybe they thought he was becoming a runner, was that a pressure? It's very nebulous.
You make me remember. I have this really short list, but they're insightful for, I think, our listeners here, of 5 or 6 situations in my professional life where I came close to, and probably did a little bit, panicking. I don't panic much. I'm pretty good under pressure usually. But a few moments really tried my soul, not just my job. Actually, I'm thinking, oh God, what do I do now? And, like there's the story I told about the draft room where I get asked. I told you that one. I won't go into that. The one where the lights crashed in Memphis and it's our only national TV, things like that. Or the basket one in Vancouver.
Yes.
Where all those things are moments where you're kind of under pressure. And I had another one. And this was at the winter meetings. I brought up the notion of this one particular statistic, how not so much decide how we publish it. There's a couple of statistics and that are hard because they're a real value to the team, to the players, and that is sacks. And sacks are hard for Jeff and I to decide sometimes because you get a guy hits him low and a guy hits him high. A guy hits him first, but he doesn't do as much as the other guy to stop his forward progress. Or the quarterback falls and he touches him down. Sam Darnold dropped back, tripped over his own guy, fell down, and the official intervened and his own offensive lineman intervened, and no Los Angeles Rams touched him. Is that a sack?
Technically, no.
No, technically no. But he dropped back to pass and lost yards. So you could define it all sorts of ways. So anyway, I brought up sacks to our rules committee. And I said, well, kind of looking at ways with Jeff to make sure that we decide in the fairest way we possibly can. And way, way, way back in the 80s, when sacks started, they were split in half. You could divide them like the NFL does.
A half sack.
Yeah, they can do that. Jeff and I think about those things all the time, about how do we do our statistics best. I guess the conversation came up and I didn't really push it, and very much. But then one of the coaches kind of stood up and said, Steve, who decides who gets a sack? Who? And his attitude was a little bit like the Brian Hill thing a long time ago with, should you do this trade or not? Same tone.
Yeah.
I remember that tone. That's the part that terrifies me. And I said, well, I do, and Jeff does. We confer on every single sack, the two of us. And he goes, you do? I said, well, who else? He goes, yeah, I guess you're right. And I said, we decide, but we don't do it on one look. We replay every sack in the moment, the next opportunity we can. So the next time out or whatever. I said, we do. He goes, oh, okay. And I said, that's how all the decisions are made. Let's just look at sacks. Look at what yard line's the ball at. Who caught that pass? He says, wasn't that obvious? I said, no. Ever watched a BC Lions game, sir? At home with black uniforms, with black numbers, with black outlines? And a thin little orange line somewhere on the jersey you can barely make out because now we're up on the fourth level so far from the field we can barely see it. The Regina Stats crew has the same issue with those green uniforms they have.
The Obsidians.
Whatever, yeah. Or the gray on gray uniforms I think there's a couple teams wear.
Or you could be in Buffalo and have the whiteout uniforms, which you can't read anywhere, even on the field.
No. It's interesting. I looked at a highlight last night at Denver and toward the end of the game. I couldn't see anything.
Oh, when they did their graphic, when they enhanced it by putting the yard markers on, the stripes and everything like that, the New England Patriots disappeared.
Yeah. It's so anyway, I was trying to explain this and I said, we do. And it's been that way since the dawn of time. Somebody's got to choose. And all I'm asking is for you to understand that choice, that our goal is not to do it any better than we do now. We already do it pretty good. It's to do it fairly because players who get sacks, and the same can be said for one or two other things, it's a matter of compensation sometimes. And we want to make sure that it's done properly. And there are moments where I won't go into, but how we wind up with our league leaders, it's watched very carefully, put it that way, by every team and other teams. And the players are extremely competitive over those and over tackles because those are the two most subjective statistics we have. Forward progress, touch him first, low, high, and Jeff and I tear my hair out I have left thinking about it.
Well, there's times when a guy will stumble to the field. A guy maybe got him by the shoe, and another guy comes and splats him on the field.
Mm-hmm.
These are tough decisions to make sometimes.
I'm just pulling up my little number sheet, and we had 6,671 defensive tackles last year. Of those 6,671, probably 6,000 were reasonably straightforward. The other 671, and Jeff has to administer all this, and we kind of look at them together, but he does the hard work. Those are contested. Or you see a player on the field like, I won't say his name, but Jovan Santos Knox puts his arm up every time he thinks he has a tackle, and rightly so. I've worked with Jovan on a couple of things, And he's such a nice guy. He's such a really good guy. But he's just simply saying, I did that. And that's okay to me. But he does it every single time. It's this way. He doesn't do it if it's just him and there's no one else around. But if there's anyone within a few yards or a few feet, up goes the arm. And I would do the same. I would do the same.
Hey, why not?
Yeah, I'm with him. I had a fascinating opportunity on Saturday. It was the Sockeyes, Christian Sockeyes junior team alumni game, and this is relevant to our league. We had two of our better players not play in the alumni game. So you take our team right now, our junior team right now, and we play former players. Many of them have played for us like a year or two ago, so they're pretty good. And they just sat out as coaches. Well, I said, wow, why don't we interview them in between periods? They're not playing. And they came up, and it was the best thing ever because you get to hear from them what it's like to be a player. And that's something I think in the CFL, I'd like to see us do more.
The people stories.
Yeah, to ask Jovan or ask Tim White or Keon Hatcher or Ben Hladek, what's it like to be a BC Lion? Or
well, what's it like to just as they announce, here come the BC Lions, and that moment when you're running on the field, what is going through your body at that moment?
Or asking David Yoon, our best player, you're 8 feet in front of the net, going hard. We lose possession of the puck. I look up, and you're below the faceoff dot in our end. How did you do that? You care enough about both ends of your game. And he says, you noticed? And I said, yeah, you do that. And that's impressive. Well, ask those same questions of CFL guys. That's what I want.
Marco Dubois, he's the guy that no matter what happens, he is the last man standing. He will not let you jog into that end zone. He is going to find you on an interception, on a kick return. He's hustling. And I've seen him with guys with 20 to 30 yard head starts, and he has just got a motor that says, I'm catching up to you.
There's a really big number. There's a really great stat that is exactly what you're talking about. This is insight into our game. He's played 119 games, and he has no games started.
Huh.
That's a huge gap because his role is to do everything else. And so your starter there would be Lewis and Pimpleton, and Keelan White even had some starts, and Justin Hardy. Whereas Dubois, one of those guys, plays a little tight end, plays fullback, covers on teams, as you said. And those kind of players, I really want to hear from them too.
They're the glue guys.
Yeah, and you need players like that. I think the Lions have some. The Riders, Jorgen Huss would be an example of a player like that. He's had 167 games with no starts.
That's an amazing set of stats.
Braden Knoll, 19 games, one start. He's been several teams, and he's still around because he's effective when you need him to come off the bench and replace a starter. And those guys don't get celebrated enough. I wish there was a way to do that.
Hi, I'm Jeff Prever. I'm the Senior Director of Player and Game Statistics with the CFL, and you're listening to the Third Down Gamble podcast.
Talk to me about the winter meetings. Everybody gets together. Now, are you all in the same room all the time? Are you making presentations and then people go off into subgroups to talk about it? How does this all work?
We have several types of meetings with different audiences. We start with a rules committee meeting. And every club used to have one member on the rules committee. Now there's two. And so it makes the meeting quite a bit larger. So the format of this year's rules committee, and I go there kind of representing Jeff and I, the initial thing, Darren Hackwood runs everything. He's our vice president of officiating. And then I actually opened proceedings. What I'll do is I'll go through high-level stuff, like the quality of our game, our numbers, the last trends over the last 5 years, and then go down to the bottom level and say, okay, here's what we want to talk about, and here's some data for you to think about. So I talked for about 20 minutes and said, okay, I've set the table for you. On third down, we had 1,700 plays. And of that, less than 2% teams gambled in situations that were not 3rd and 1 or 2 with a quarterback sneak, or necessitated by being behind at the end of the game, what I call late trailing. So in other words, where you had a choice earlier in the game, and that's a percentage that we're hoping to increase. So we would discuss that concept. How do we do that? And the specifics are still down the road, but at least you put the thought out there. And then Darren will come along and send me an email and say, okay, I need data on these 8 things. Or how many plays are there in the final 3 minutes of our games compared to the rest of the game? Well, I track all that. That's part of the analytics. And I always tell my boss, for every analytic you see, I got about 4 that I don't publish, simply because less is more. And if you have so many different numbers, they tune them all out. You don't want that. He'll ask for specifics about what's the most egregious penalty you can take in terms of helping the other team's offense. How often do we call that penalty? Are we calling it more now or less? How long does it take to play the first 12 minutes of the 4th quarter? Those are specific questions. You got to be ready with your data. I sat in a plane for 3 hours and wound up not getting to Calgary until much later, but I was able to make my presentation at least. I didn't miss that. And then after that, back to your original question, then it'll be a different group of just the general managers. And then a football operations meeting. So there'll be 2 different people from each club, much overlap. And then you get the kind of board of governor level. So every audience gets a different presentation. So I usually make my presentation to 2 separate groups and then sit in on them all to be there to answer questions when something comes up. So I got to be on the ready at all times with the analytics. You know, I truly mean it when I say I represent both Jeff and I, because we both have different takes on all our statistics. Much of what we do is just offline. But it's easy and better to be offline, because then you're not continually reprogramming everything we do. For example, one of the cool things is, where do teams start their drives from? And on average, that's the 37.2 yard line. But that's not enough. Where do they start their drives? Because this is how they got the ball. After a kickoff, after a punt, after a field goal made, because those relate directly to the rule book. So for example, if you kick a single, you get the ball at the 40. Or if you miss a field goal, you get it, I think, where the ball was held. Those sorts of NFL, that's for sure. That kind of thing. So, okay, so say the ball hits the uprights on the attempt. You get it at 30. How are we going to handle that in future now that we've eliminated approximately half of the singles? Say you miss a field goal, kick it right straight through the back of the end zone, no one touches it. Where do you put the ball after that? That kind of question.
I'm hoping the 20.
I don't know yet.
I don't want to be the NFL, but if it's going to be a touchback, which is constructively what it becomes, if a ball goes through the end zone untouched, it's the 20.
Then you've just created 40 drives. They're starting 90 yards from the other goal.
Next year.
I'm talking about 2026.
Okay, fair enough.
Now you just created 40 drives, 90 yards from the goal, by putting it at 20. And the probability of a touchdown drive from the 20 compared to the 40 is about twice as frequent from the 40. Those are the things we need to know. What is the average start yard line after an event that gives you possession, like a turnover? The average possession point after a turnover is just short of midfield. So if you don't have that many turnovers anymore, teams are starting pretty deep in their own end. Turnovers are important. They create touchdowns and all sorts of stuff.
You must also have statistics for, okay, let's say the possession started at 22 plays, they're out, they kick it. How many times does a team on that ensuing punt, once they start their drive, how many times they score as a result of the fact that these guys were pinned and now we've got way better field position?
Yes, we do that. Break it. Every possession down, there's 2,128 of them. And we break it down by how they got the ball and what they did with it. You'd be surprised, some of that. We don't publish absolutely every last thing, but we publish a lot. You got to know how they got the ball and what they did with it after in all sorts of dimensions. And I got to say, that is fun. I enjoy kind of creating that picture.
You're like an artist.
I have a picture in my office. It hangs over my desk. And it's because I went there and I dragged my wife all the way there to this place in the Netherlands. And the picture is by Jan Vermeer called The View of Delft. And if you look at this picture, it's just a view of some churches and the river and the little river that runs through Delft in Holland. On the surface, it's just a picture, right? That's all it is. Nothing special until you get inside the picture and you start asking questions about what that picture looks like. And there is so much politics and so much Protestant versus Catholic, this versus that in the picture. You realize that this is not just an artist, it's a social commentary. There's more behind things than you might expect. And I love this picture because I have some connections to Netherlands week, and it's just fun. And so that's the way I try to think of things. There's more depth to it than just what you see on the surface. Same with our game. With
the uprights going back to the back of the end zone, when you're going into the other team's zone, where do you have to decide, okay, we can gamble here and still go for the touchdown, or maybe take our losses, we'll just kick the field goal? There's got to be a new demarcation line where that all happens in 2027.
You can call that. I created a term for it. It's called the gray zone. These are just discussions. I'm not giving anything away here, but the point of demarcation, as you so nicely put, say today, with today's rules, you get to the 40 and you're the BC Lions and you have Shaun White as your kicker and you stall at the 40, your field goal is 47 yards. It would be 48 if you were Saskatchewan. They place the ball 8 yards back, other teams 7. So 48, and that's an automatic. You're going to do that. But now you move the goalpost back 15 yards, and that 47-yard field goal becomes 62. Well, that's not going to happen. So what do you do?
Not with Shaun White.
Not with Shaun White. So now you got the line of scrimmage is the 40, and it's 3rd and 5. Am I going to punt? Let's say it's the 32-yard line, and that's a 39-yard field goal right now. It would be a 54-yard field goal with the end zone 15 deep, say. None of this has been finalized, but say it is. Are you going to try a 54-yard field goal every single time as if you would do that under today's field design? No, you wouldn't. So now the next step is, okay, what happens to the X number of possessions? And we track them all by starting point and a new term. And this is a new term you'll hear many times, I think, called a third down stall. And that is our drive ended by going to third down, third and anything, at what yard line? What do teams do at that yard line? So if you stall on third down at your own 12-yard line, unless it's what we call that late trail, right? You have no choice. You got to go for it. You're punting. So now what do you do between the 35 and the 50? That's that zone. If you're at the 50, you are not trying a 72-yard field goal, right? No way. So now do you punt or you go for it? And there's your decision in that gray zone. What percentage of them will create more gambles? And in the NFL, boy, there's a lot more of that. They had, I think it was 53 more turnovers on downs this year than they had the previous season.
They don't call those turnovers.
They don't call them turnovers, but they do calculate them and publish them. They're published in the drive charts as they just call it downs.
Oh,
But to me, you're losing possession of the ball.
you did not give it up willingly.
Same as fumbling the ball away.
Yeah.
The other team has the ball in their possession. You missed something.
Or you came up short or whatever the case may be. But that wasn't your choice to fail.
You were unsuccessful
Yeah.
in what you were trying to do.
Yeah.
Which is the same as an interception. I was unsuccessful in trying to complete a pass. I gave the ball away.
Exactly.
I know they don't publish that, and Jeff and I talk about those things too and how we publish stuff. We currently show turnovers on downs ourselves as its own category, and then we fold that into total, what we call giveaways or total turnovers. The NFL just shows turnovers as fumbles lost and interceptions, but they also have this turnovers on downs. They don't publish it much, but it's there. All you got to do is add them up. That's what I do. So I add up every possession in the NFL, all 5,700 possessions. We've got all those broken down. X number of them are turnovers on downs. 560 something. It's happening twice a game that a team loses the ball on downs. I realize I can't call it a turnover on downs. The other team gets the ball.
That's right.
Those are things that happen.
The 32, this is a great line because it is a 54-yard field goal with the new goalpost arrangement. But you don't want to punt from the 32.
Exactly. There's your gray zone. And it's a pun, actually, because gray matter being our brains. Now I got to think what I do. Now what? You're not punting from the 32. Where's the gain in that? Go for it. They're 78 yards from the goal if you throw an incomplete pass. That's better than usual. But now, what do you do at their other team's 38 or the 43? It gets harder and harder as you go farther from the goal. That's going to be the really interesting part of all of this. It changes the dynamic of our game. And what our rules committee members decide in their final decisions that they make, I'm all ears right now. I advise them, say, this is what I think will happen. In reality, I can extrapolate it. I can calculate it. This is what I think. And then turn it over to my boss who says, yeah, okay, I'll agree with you. And then we go from there. So there's dynamic of this many more touchdowns because you're going to get more touchdowns, right? If you gamble at the 32, what percentage of the number of times that happens, does it create a turnover? Or do you get a first down? Now what? Do you get a first down and then kick a field goal? Or do you get a first down and go on to a touchdown? That's hard. That's what I had to do this past year. And okay, you have to extrapolate that. It's like asking me, what's it like? Busy to find a lunch place on Venus? Is there life on Mars? I think so, but these are things you can't know exactly the outcome. I know that was kind of silly, but yeah.
But your point is well taken. Until you go through the experience, you will not know what the answer is. There's a lot of very smart coaching staffs around this league that will be put to the test on a lot of these situations.
What do I do now?
Exactly. And they've got 35 seconds to make up their mind.
Dave Dickinson, dear friend, is completely different than Mike O'Shea. Mike O'Shea hasn't tried a 2-point convert like ever unless he has to. Dave Dickinson tries them all the time. Got different views of probable success.
Do you feel like you've been through 2 separate winter meetings because you had all of this work leading up to the September announcement, and now you've had this work in January?
2 would be putting it mildly.
3?
Yeah, this was a privilege to be part of the working group that helps. But ultimately, it's our board and our senior leadership team that's making these decisions. And to be part of the group that's advising, to be the numbers guy. And I laughed so hard because my first professional assignment was the 1995 of a serious nature full time was the Vancouver Grizzlies. That was the nickname that Rex Hughes, the assistant coach, gave me like the second day. Hey, numbers, come here. Well, that makes me feel good because it's the data, the numbers, that are helping you to make these decisions. And yes, probably went through 4 or 5 iterations to help our decision makers do what they do and give them the advice that makes their decision at least clearer. If you can accomplish that, yes, that's several iterations. So the number's probably closer to 5 sets of winter meetings. And I wouldn't change a thing. Still be doing this at this point in my working career. You look at it that way too, right? And it's awfully privileged spot to be sitting.
Privilege is a great word, because when you think about it, there's the CFL that we knew of 110, and it used to be 25 end zones, 20, now 15 coming up. The CFL is undergoing a lot of growth, and you're in amongst all of this. And I'm sure for you, your brain almost must explode with all the permutations that are out there.
At the winter meetings, I'm sitting there, and one of the days I had to do online, and so I can barely hear. I'm reaching out to the guy in the room, saying, "Please turn the mic on so I can hear what this person is saying or that person, so I can respond to the question." Are you ready? As I've said to you a number of times, the skill in the job that I have is not necessarily knowing all the answers. You can never do that. It's knowing the questions they're going to ask you. And to me, I'm sitting there with those answers, anticipating these 11 questions. There's a lot of them. And, "Oh, Steve, did you hear that?" I said, well, no, we don't have a mic, but could you repeat it? And that gives me, 2-3 seconds to turn around and do that. And I wouldn't change that for anything, because I don't call that a panic moment. I call that one of those moments where you're challenged. And if you're ready and you got some information, man, that feels so good to be able to say, well, this is what I think. In my world, over the last 32 years, there's no greater question that you can get done than someone asks, "Steve, what do you think?" And if that question is not asked very often, I find that tough to absorb. I tell my boss that all the time when we have our meetings. We meet once a week. I say, the more often you ask me that question, the harder I work, period. And it's odd that the owner of the Richmond Sockeyes is the same guy, not the same person, but the same type of guy as my boss at the CFL. They're cut from the same mold, and I would do anything for both of them, simply because they ask me, "What do you think we should do?" In the world of analytics, if that question is not being asked of you, you're doing something wrong. That's what you're there for.
I know in press conferences with the media, and especially with the announcement in September, Commissioner Stuart Johnston pointed directly at you in the stats department and said, the work that you did informed their decisions.
I cannot begin to tell you what that felt like. There's a flip side to that, though, and that is unnamed people will come at you and say, "But my data says this about end zone completions and things like that." And my only response is not to get into the personal side of it and just say, "Okay, fine, but here's our data." And we view our data as pretty good and rigorous, well-researched. It's interesting. I love this question. Here's a really good thing for our fans to hear. And that is, you can make a list of all the third down gambles and just write down 3rd and 6. What happened? Or you can have 14 columns to say it happened in this quarter on this play by this team, and 3rd and 6 at this yard line with this much time to go in the game, and the score was this. Now you've got context. Now you can understand why we gambled on 3rd and 8, or we didn't at 3rd and 1 because we led by 1 point or whatever. So that level of rigor in our data is how I respond to unnamed people saying, well, that's not what I see. And fortunately, Stuart is someone that it's easy to say the boss is great for whatever other reasons you may have. But Stuart is the kind of person like my boss who says, what do you think, Steve? And I'm not always right. I'm wrong a lot. Not for lack of trying. So yeah, when he said that, I sort of melted.
High praise.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of how your show's separated from a lot of other things. You get right into the game in places where no one else gets to. And what comes out of that is a better understanding of what's going on, not just on the field, but off. I'll get a phone call 2 days after the season is over from a general manager saying, where did we go wrong? Oh, I don't know, but this is what I see. That's the same level of trust, I suppose that's the word. That's been that way for 30 years, and hopefully it continues on. I know Jeff's earned that same level of trust as well. And we've got a young guy that's joined us, Harvey, and we're just trying to do our best, but our data's good. If it isn't, then we got some problems. That's kind of how that dynamic works between the people who ask the questions and the answers you give them. And so when someone comes along and says 60 touchdowns, where's that coming from? That's ridiculous. Well, what happens if we don't punt from the 32 and we don't try a field goal attempt? Now what? He says, well, you're going to have 60 more touchdowns, all that many more points? And my response was, well, you're not making as many field goals. Oh, that's right. Yeah. So what about our scoring? It's going to rocket up because of all those touchdowns? No, it's going to go down a little bit, probably. Not much, maybe a point. But anyway,
But 60 touchdowns is less than a touchdown per game over the season.
With all those gambles, I just shake my head and just put it into the framework of what you just did. And if someone would do that, then it begins to make more sense. And then you can tinker with yard lines and other rules and the number of plays and how many more offensive plays there'll be or fewer. There's a lot. And so what the picture at the end isn't going to look like the view of Delft in my office, but it's going to be a painting of some description that becomes our game in 2027.
The 35-second clock, how many time count violations are going to happen until people get used to the idea that we better hustle?
I know. This is the kind of discussion I like because we just go back and forth and create dynamic thinking around what happens if. I was trying to think of other elements in our off season that are going to change our game at all. And we're always, of course, our roster changes in the off season, things like that. But the structure of our game is something that's really important right now. That's the topic, or what we call game flow. That's key for us, Don. How long it takes. Possession changes. In the NFL, there's 21 possessions in a game. We have 27. So there's an extra 6 because we have fewer downs. It's harder to drive continuity is a little tougher. That's 6 extra timeout situations or commercial situations. We're looking at that all the time. For our fans and for your listeners and viewers, it's about that dynamic of our game flow that we're really keen to get right. Stuart is in the absolute right place with Greg to make this game continue to flow better than it is now. Not that it doesn't do well, but to make it even better. That's my hope. And to be involved in that and help them is a good thing.
It's exciting times.
It is. I got a text from a grandparent of a player the other night when I was broadcasting the game, right in the middle of the game. I don't know how he got my phone number, but he did. And saying, we're so grateful for the way that you're broadcasting this game on behalf of our players and our parents. Thank you very much.
Wow.
It made me feel like this volunteer effort is helping others. And I think that's what you and I are doing today together in our wild and weird conversations. It is we're helping others know the game better, enraging some and confusing others. And
when change happens, there are always those that rail against it, those that want to take time to think about it, and those that are on board ready to run with it.
I know I've been asked this question many times. What do you think of these changes? Do you like them? And I tend not to cast my opinion very often. My usual answer is I support whatever this group, wherever we want to go. But I will say this. These are three things that I prefer not to see changed, in my humble opinion. And you can use that or not. And that is, do not change the width of the field. Do not change the number of downs. And do not change moving forward at the snap of the ball. Those are things that create our game and its uniqueness. They didn't. And I'm happy about that. That's the kind of bottom line for me. If a change makes our game better for our fans, let's do it.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me again today, Steve. This was awesome.
It gets better every time, I think. I love it.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble Podcast. Audio worth watching.